The chapel was silent except for the occasional creak of old wood under the weight of grief. David stood near the casket, staring not at his mother's face but at her hands. One hand crossed delicately over the other. Both bare a ring. Not just any ring, the family ring. An antique gold piece with a deep sapphire center, passed down through generations, his great-grandfathers, then his grandfathers, then his mother's. Until now. Only it wasn't there. At first, he thought it might have been removed for security, or perhaps for sentiment, to be returned to the family after the burial. But when he quietly asked the funeral director, the answer was cold. No such item was with the body. That night, while mourners sent condolences in casseroles, David sat alone with a photograph from decades ago. His parents smiling, his mother proudly showing off the ring. She never took it off. Not once. Until she died. His stomach turned. Because in that silence, something whispered louder than grief. She sold it. And if she did, it wasn't for survival. She had wealth, investments, properties, luxury. The ring wasn't a necessity. It was a choice. And in that choice, David felt something break, not the bond with his mother, which had long been cracked, but the illusion that anything sacred had survived her legacy. That night, he didn't cry. He simply sat in the dark, tracing the outline of a missing circle that once meant belonging. Now it felt like erasure. David had always known his mother was difficult, but after her death, difficult felt like a mercy. She wasn't warm, she wasn't cruel either, just calculating, polished, strategic with her love. Every compliment came with a comparison, every hug a hidden condition. She believed in legacy, but to her, legacy meant image, not meaning. Their family dinners were less about connection and more about performance. Napkins folded with precision, silence during meals, and stories rehearsed like scripts. He remembered once at 12 years old asking her if he could bring a friend from school, someone whose parents didn't have much. Her answer, "This isn't a house for charity, it's a house for excellence." That sentence stuck, like the ring on her finger, unmoving, permanent. And yet, now it was gone. David started making calls. His mother's lawyer was evasive. "Everything is accounted for," he insisted. But David knew that tone. He'd heard it his whole life, the curated calm that came when truth was too uncomfortable. Finally, he reached out to Esther, his mother's oldest friend, a woman who knew the family long before they had wealth. Esther didn't hesitate. "She sold the ring last year," she said plainly. David's breath caught. She said it was just an object, said you'd never wear it, that it didn't suit the new image she was curating for the estate. David hung up, numb. He wasn't angry the ring was gone. He was angry it had never mattered to her the way it did to him. Because for David it wasn't jewelry, it was memory, bloodline, proof that someone before him had endured and loved and passed something real on. Now it was just cash, spent, erased. He whispered aloud to no one, "She sold our past for a future I don't even want." David stood in his mother's study the day after the funeral. The house was quiet, too quiet, not with grief, but with relief. Like even the walls were tired of pretending. Every item around him had a tag, appraised, insured, sorted, except one small jewelry box on the corner of the mahogany desk. Empty. He opened drawers, checked the safe, nothing. That ring had belonged to his grandmother, a simple band of gold with a dark sapphire in the middle. Not extravagant, but significant. His grandmother used to say, "This ring has seen more truth than any of us ever dared speak." It wasn't listed in the will, not even mentioned, and that's when he knew. It had been removed long before she died, intentionally. He searched pawn records, private auction logs, hired someone to trace the serial number inscribed on the inner band, his grandfather's initials. And there it was, sold 11 months prior to a buyer in Geneva, the money wired through an anonymous trust. It felt like betrayal layered over loss. His mother had always said the ring would be his. "One day," she'd whisper, smoothing his hair, "one day this will be yours, because it carries everything we've survived." But that day never came. Instead, she chose a curated legacy. Artifacts sold, stories rewritten, her version of immortality wrapped in modern furniture and abstract paintings. At the funeral, everyone praised her strength, her style, her poise. David didn't speak, he didn't cry, he just looked at her closed casket and thought, "She couldn't take the ring with her, but she made sure I couldn't have it either." And that hurt more than her absence ever could. Because when someone erases your inheritance, They're not just selling gold. They're rewriting who you're allowed to become. David returned to the house one last time before it was handed over to the estate agents. It was raining. The kind of soft, constant drizzle that makes silence louder. The power had already been shut off, and the only light came through the tall windows in the living room. The same room where his mother hosted endless charity brunches, all staged smiles and subtle domination. He sat on the floor and opened the only box he had taken aside: old family photos. His mother was meticulous about appearances, but careless with memories. She kept albums, but most were curated. Only the best angles, the parties where she shone, the holidays where the background mattered more than the people. Then at the bottom of the box, David found a torn envelope marked, "To be burned." Inside, photos his mother never displayed. One showed her as a teenager, sitting beside her mother, David's grandmother, who was clearly holding the sapphire ring. Another showed David as a child, holding that same hand. And finally, one black and white photo of his mother, holding the ring after the funeral of his grandfather. Her eyes swollen, no makeup, no audience, just a daughter in mourning, not yet narcissistic, not yet untouchable. That was the version of her David had never met, but always suspected existed. He held the photo and whispered, "You knew what it meant, that's why you sold it." And maybe that was true, because to a woman who spent her life rewriting stories, that ring held the one narrative she couldn't control. The quiet love of a family that had once been real. David didn't take anything else, just the photos, just the proof that beneath all her vanity, she once remembered what it was like to be loved without needing to impress. And as he stepped out into the rain, he realized, some inheritances are not stolen. They're buried under the parts of someone they hoped you'd never find. David returned to the house one last time before it was handed over to the estate agents. It was raining. The kind of soft, constant drizzle that makes silence louder. The power had already been shut off, and the only light came through the tall windows in the living room, the same room where his mother hosted endless charity brunches, all staged smiles and subtle domination. He sat on the floor and opened the only box he had taken aside: old family photos. His mother was meticulous about appearances, but careless with memories. She kept albums, but most were curated. Only the best angles, the parties where she shone, the holidays where the background mattered more than the people. Then, at the bottom of the box, David found a torn envelope marked, "To be burned." Inside, photos his mother never displayed. One showed her as a teenager, sitting beside her mother, David's grandmother, who was clearly holding the sapphire ring. Another showed David as a child, holding that same hand. And finally, one black and white photo of his mother holding the ring after the funeral of his grandfather. Her eyes swollen. No makeup, no audience, just a daughter in mourning, not yet narcissistic, not yet untouchable. That was the version of her David had never met, but always suspected existed. He held the photo and whispered, "You knew what it meant. That's why you sold it." And maybe that was true, because to a woman who spent her life rewriting stories, that ring held the one narrative she couldn't control. The quiet love of a family that had once been real. David didn't take anything else. Just the photos. Just the proof that beneath all her vanity, she once remembered what it was like to be loved without needing to impress. And as he stepped out into the rain, he realized, some inheritances are not stolen. They're buried under the parts of someone they hoped you'd never find. 2 weeks later, David stood in front of a pawn shop on the edge of town. It wasn't just any pawn shop. It was the one noted in an old receipt he found hidden in one of his mother's books, dated 7 years ago, described as gold ring, emerald center, engraved initials, the family ring. His hand trembled as he entered. The place smelled of dust and resignation. Glass counters held memories disguised as merchandise, watches once gifted with love, necklaces pawned for rent, rings that had outlived their vows. Behind the counter stood a man with tired eyes. "I'm looking for a ring," David said, unfolding the receipt. "It belonged to my mother." The man glanced at the paper, then at David. He walked into the back room without a word. Minutes passed. When he returned, he held a small box. Inside was the ring. Their ring. Still polished. Still whole, but changed. David could see the past reflected in the emerald. His parents dancing at a wedding, his grandmother holding his hand, Every holiday where the ring caught candlelight, every lie his mother told while wearing it. He asked how much. The man waved his hand. It was never claimed. Been here too long. No value on paper. But if it means something to you, take it. David didn't cry, but his breath caught, like memory had punched him in the chest. He thanked the man, stepped outside, and stood beneath a sky that finally looked honest. That night, he placed the ring in a velvet box. Not to wear, not to sell, but to keep. Not because it had value, but because it reminded him what value wasn't. It wasn't public image, it wasn't a charity foundation, it wasn't control. It was love, shared, remembered, held in the smallest things, like a ring. Back at his apartment, David opened the last item from the lawyer's envelope. A letter. Not the kind with warmth or memories. It was typed, formal, almost cold, but unmistakably written by his mother. David, if you're reading this, I'm gone. You always thought I held on to the ring because of tradition. You were wrong. I kept it because it reminded me of what I sacrificed to stay relevant. Every time I looked at it, I saw choices. Some I made for love, most for control. I sold it because it no longer served me, and maybe neither did you. David reread the line 3 times. Maybe neither did you. It wasn't anger he felt, not even pain. It was clarity. His entire life, he tried to earn a kind of love that came with conditions, that bent around appearances, that weighed hugs against expectations. The letter didn't break his heart, it proved it had already been broken, and he just hadn't admitted it. But something inside him settled. He picked up the ring one more time, placed it gently in a drawer beside the letter. 2 relics, 1 history, but only one worth passing down. Later that week, his sister visited. She brought tea. They didn't speak of the funeral or the will, but she noticed the ring in the drawer. Did she ever say why? She asked. David shook his head. Doesn't matter anymore, he said, because finally it didn't. They sat in silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that holds space, and that was the first real inheritance he ever received. Months passed, David didn't wear the ring. He didn't display it either, but he didn't sell it. Some days he'd open the drawer, read the letter again, not for answers but for reminders. Reminders that not every story needs closure. Some just need space to breathe. One Sunday his niece, his sister's daughter, was playing in the living room. She found the drawer. She picked up the ring, slipped it on her finger, and asked, "Is this a princess ring?" David smiled. "No," he said. "It belonged to someone very strong and very sad." The girl tilted her head. Was she mean? "She forgot how to be kind," he replied. His sister watched from the hallway. She didn't interrupt. Later they talked, not about their mother, but about what they wanted to become instead. David started writing. Not a book, not a memoir, just small notes, things he wished someone had told him. Forgiveness doesn't always begin with others. Sometimes it starts with the truth you stop avoiding. He slipped one note into the same drawer. Right beside the ring. He didn't need to pass down the ring. He needed to pass down the wisdom. The family name remained the same, but its meaning, finally, had a chance to change. Not every inheritance is made of gold. Some are just the courage to end what hurt generations before